We've got an extraordinary panel here that, if I just say these are the big fish in the Boston, Harvard, MIT community, it would be an apt summation. So these are people who have had extraordinary careers, are leading huge research and clinical operations, and ones that we're able to bring together today is a real gift. So I feel very honored. I'm going to give very quick introductions to them individually. They're here in part, because of their who they represent. As we've talked about today throughout and yesterday, we're talking about ecosystems. We're talking about the groupings of interconnections that Boston has that allow us to work so broadly, so interdisciplinarily, that make this a really special place, and one that draws people from Beaumont, Texas, and draws people from Central Virginia and from all over the world to be able just to play here. And if you can't find anything better than that, it's hard to imagine. First, I'll talk about the background of Dr. Colin Stultz, who's similarly coming from the year 1967, I saw, which is always a good marker.
You have to tell my age.
It could have been your mother. So Dr. Stultz is a cardiologist at MGH. He serves as the co-director of the HST program, which some of you I know are members of, but we will be talking, and he will be teaching us about what exactly the health sciences and technology program is between Harvard and MIT. He's also associate director of IMES, who will be talking about that, and Alex will be talking about it in some detail, which is the Institute for Medical Engineering and Science here at MIT. Alex is, as mentioned, the director of IMES, the Institute for Medicine, Engineering, and Science. He's the director of the Health Innovation Lab and got his PhD from Harvard in chemical physics, and is doing super cool work and has been extraordinarily supportive of Dr. Peterson and our efforts, which is hugely appreciated. And lastly, the one I know very best is MVR, as we call him. Michael Van Rooyen is, I've known for, 27 years, something like that, who is the enterprise chief of emergency medicine of MGB, has been a long-serving emergency physician. We share a lot of background in that we like to go to places that are kind of falling apart and find ways we can help. He's done it at a higher level than I. He's the co-founder and current director of the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. He's deployed around the world with a number of different national and international agencies, and has faculty appointments both at Harvard Med School and at the Chan School of Public Health. And that intersection of direct application of medical skills to where they're needed, I think helps tie together a bunch of the different, as we were talking during this morning's economic conversation, that bench to bedside, how do we get great innovations to the people we want to help? That's ultimately what we're here to do. So each of them are going to start off in order with Colin, then Alex and Mike Van Rooyen, taking about 5 minutes to introduce their institutes. Again, I've been here 27 years, and I'm still like, what? How does this all fit together? So part of it is, figuring out what the lay of the land is, and then we'll talk about how the different plants and animals work together.
Great. So this is loud. Colin Stultz. I direct the Harvard MIT program in health sciences and technology. I think commonly known as HST. I see a few members of the HST community here in the audience. So for those of you that are not familiar, the background here is in 1970, our founder, Irving London, came from Mount Sinai with a vision of how to educate physician scientists that want to work in quantitative areas. And it was sort of a different paradigm at the time. It was science and engineering coupled with medicine, and how you could effectively train such scholars to work at the forefront of this enterprise downstream. Now, MIT does not have a medical school, I think someone said once it's a pretty good engineering school. Is that correct? Yeah. So I think it has a storied history both in engineering and computer science, as well as a variety of other disciplines. And Harvard is, medical school in particular, is arguably the strongest and most accomplished medical school in the country. So how can you combine the strengths of these two places towards this goal? And I tried to articulate some of this here. So HST integrates medical education both between MIT and Harvard. So our students are members of both communities at Harvard and at MIT. And the goal is that they can traverse both environments at ease in an unimpeded fashion. So they can benefit from the rigorous science and engineering training that happens at MIT and apply this if they aspire to be clinicians in their clinical practice, if they aspire to be scholars. Physicians can be scholars, of course. If they aspire to be scientists, rather, that they can do this in that domain as well. We have many graduates who've been able to work at the interface. I think it's a unique educational experience, unlike any other in the country. Students here are grounded in physiology, as well as typically in some other quantitative discipline. There are 3 educational programs we have. And in the pink, you'll see that's to the left here, is our medical education program. So those students come in, are educated, receive an MD, and some of them go on to clinical practice. And then on the blue, we have a PhD program in medical engineering and medical physics, where students come into MIT. Many of them are based at MIT and declare an area of concentration, whether it be computer science or an engineering discipline or even biology. The space in the middle is where these students intersect. The central paradigm of the program is that students interact with one another, so throughout their education. So the PhD, those who are aspiring for PhDs in engineering or science, sit down in the same classes with medical students. And there's an interplay between these two students and some knowledge transfer that I think creates something that's more than just the sum of its parts. And I think that is a unique aspect of the program. I will just lastly say, so my own scientific interests are, I'm a computer scientist. I'm a professor of computer science at MIT, and I think there's specific benefits here for quantitative sciences like computer science in this domain. I can opine about that at length, but I won't. I think I'll shut up.
No,
stay here.
You got me. Again, a huge portion of this is me educating myself. So the sense of the story you tell and what your group does, hugely useful. Alex, can you tell us about IMES?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So hi, everybody. I'm Alex Schick. I'm the director of the Institute for Medical Engineering and Science, or IMES, at MIT. I'm a faculty member in the chemistry department, the Koch, the Broad, Reagan, MGB, and HMS. And you know what IMES is really all about is it's about creating a community where people can bring together science, engineering, and medicine. So in 2012, MIT decided to formalize a structure that would help bring to bear all the things that HST hoped to ensconce. So by creating an inclusive community that would focus on both research and education to advance health for all, I'm really trying to educate individuals who span these disciplines. And the remit that we have within IMES sitting here at MIT is to be an integrative force for human health research and education at MIT. So that means, to point 3, that we are a home for the HST program at MIT. And we also like to serve as a strategic portal to the surrounding hospitals and industry. I have no claim to space other than the fact that I like looking at the stars, and my son's name is Orion. But it's been great to be here because the essence of the program is exactly the reason why I am at MIT. You might say, why does somebody who has a PhD in chemical physics sitting up here? It's because what I actually do is I develop genomic technologies, and I go all around the world, and I work in low resource settings, which is somewhat like what you all do. But the reason that I'm at MIT and I don't want to be anywhere else is because of the proximity to the hospitals, the proximity to Harvard Medical School, the fact that we could do interdisciplinary things at the intersection of science, engineering, and medicine that would be impossible to do anywhere else. And so the very idea of bringing together a community that would think about, wilderness and space medicine in combination with aeroastro and engineering and all the things that are happening here feels like something that can uniquely happen in this ecosystem and must uniquely happen in this ecosystem. And so, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to support Lonnie. I'm not sure about Stuart yet, but I'm excited to support Lonnie. Yeah. Because I see the value of bringing together communities to do things that are transformative. And I can't imagine another place where you could have the kinds of fellows that have spoken already to do the kinds of things that are happening here. And whereas other places can offer real estate in the space to launch explosions, 'cause basically you're strapping yourself to a bomb, which is insane, but we can talk about that later. This is a place where we can think about how to repair when possible. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to think about how we can partner between AeroAstro, the surrounding hospitals, and use IMES as a place to initiate and support activity among all those constituents.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I'll have everybody look, the SpearMed flag on the back, and you can look up front. Those may look like a random cluster of stars, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, if I can't sleep, I found it's good for me to get out of bed, go walk around in the backyard, and between a maple and an oak, inevitably framed there is Orion. So that is Orion. It's part of our cluster.
And Stuart, if you have trouble sleeping, you just look at my socks, which are constellation socks.
I was going to comment on those.
So there are no accidents here, okay. Welcome, great to see everybody, and thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with my esteemed panelists, and Lonnie and Stuart, congratulations, and your whole team, congratulations in pushing this forward. I think 3-5 years from now, this auditorium will not be able to hold the people that are going to be more interested in this issue, because it's both brand new and really important. And I think the thing that I want to kind of riff off of my colleagues a little bit is the next step, and that is, if we want to think about a new discipline, a new medical discipline, a new scientific and particularly human medical discipline, I think it takes a number of things that are pretty unique to this environment and leveraging those unique things. Those are going to be things, and here we have this very unique, concentrated, high-level biomedical environment that does things from bench to patient, bench to bedside, and beyond, but also has the underpinnings of technology, of analytics, of just wicked smart thinkers in every discipline. And the ability to actually leverage all of those things to create a new medical discipline, and this is a new medical discipline, that's why you're here, allows us to leverage all of that. But just leveraging all of those resources is not enough, because it doesn't get us all the way to a recognized discipline that people will then go to find experts in that when they're preparing for spaceflight, right? You want to have people that have some degree of credential and some degree of training and some degree of reproducible skill that they can point to. And in order to do that, you have to have all these components, all the technical components, all the scientific components, all the super multidisciplinary components, because this is by definition highly multidisciplinary. But then it needs to be stabilized in a structure. And those structures, for better or for worse, in the academic world are schools and departments, right? That's where medical specialties reside. They reside in schools and departments, and it gives them sort of some sense of kind of reproducible validity. And I will just say that there is no place, in my humble opinion, and I'm not initially from here, I've been here for a really long time, but just this area, the combination of the technical aspects and the technical capabilities of these colleges that we're talking about in MIT and at Harvard, et cetera, the multiple medical specialties that this will affect across the MGB system and across the Boston biomedical system, the sort of appetite for innovation around devices and biomedical devices all comes together in a way that is really, I think, special and unique here. And I think, the very last thing, this sort of idea of the secret sauce of innovation to some degree is proximity. And it's not necessarily proximity to the rocket. It's not necessarily proximity to the launch pad. It's proximity to the thinkers. And the proximity to the thinkers creates an environment that is just like on fire, actually. And so, just like Alex said, one of the things that I, thrilled about being here and have been thrilled for the 20 years that I've been here is the thinkers and the collaboration and the mad scientists and the nutty people that are doing work like this. And so, for us that have to take all of that stuff and translate it into some sort of a structure that will get us to a medical discipline, it's not always easy, but it is the thing, because then we get to help usher in something that is truly unique, truly important, and truly future-facing. So anyway, delighted to be here. Thanks for all of you for attending, and happy to support.
Thank you, MVR. Alex, just to follow up on that, Mike set me up beautifully, just the sense of how institutions invest and prioritize next steps. I assume it's public thrusts, another thing, the sense of how does an institution recognize and invest in what are going to be especially high impact areas of study?
Oh, you tell me. So I think the best and the worst thing about MIT is that we are a grassroots institute that is run by our faculty members. Those of us who are in the jobs that we're in now were not trained for those jobs, and we definitely were not trained to do things like fundraise or to build programs or anything like that, but we figured out one way or another. I think that the lack of top-down mandate is also a blessing, because it means if Lonnie comes to me and says, hey, I've got this crazy idea, I want to do this thing, you can say, why not? And we're all problem solvers here. What I've liked about my movement down the river, on most days, from Harvard over here, is that people here like to come up with solutions, and they're willing to hack together anything necessary to actually make stuff work. And so, if you want to do something, you hack together an aeroastro department with a program that thinks about education with Harvard, and then you say, well, what would it take? Who else would we need? Because we know that we can't do it all alone. And so you find people, you get together, you have conversations, and then you start to think about, well, what do you need to get started? And then who do you go out to afterwards? I think there are ways of getting things initiated and launched, and everybody's good at figuring out how to pull together a little bit of resources and that kind of stuff. But I think that pulling together this community and showing its value and starting to show the kinds of tangible products that you are and the people that you're training is a very good way of bringing together additional investment and getting more people excited about it. And I think that as space medicine becomes something that becomes more in the forefront, because more people go to space, it's a greater variety of people that are going to space, they're going to be looking for the best people to go up. You have already highlighted how space is this thing where it's a very elite group of people who are already filtered for these incredible characteristics, and I can't imagine that they would want doctors that would be trained to any less of a degree. And so, a program at Man's Greatest Hospital, or however you want to think about it, although I don't love that, is probably a good partnership for people that have thought about the elitism of space.
Thank you, Alex. And I'm going to open it up to questions. If anybody has a question at any point, feel free to come down and stand at the mic, and we can take that. But looking at earlier, the panel before this, not the series of speakers, but I think the panel before this, we had Harvard Business School professor Matt Weinzierl with his book Space to Grow, and former chair of Mass Bio and a representative from Mass Bio, in talking to a friend with the state at lunch, just thinking, how do we make the case that the combination of innovation, investment, radically changed, decreasing cost of getting to orbit, as a friend who's here as a lay citizen but having a job when it's not the furlough at NASA, says, it's the second space age. This is fundamentally different than it has been for the last 60 years. How do we make that case with funding agencies, with governments? So we heard earlier, Texas has put in, I think, $550 million. California, $350. Florida is investing heavily in trying to hire away our faculty. What are institutional approaches we can take to try to make sure we don't revisit 128 technology going and enriching Silicon Valley.
I'm going to just follow up on this and some of the other comments that were made. I used to tell students that we're looking for research projects that if you go to bed at night and you dream of a project and there's nobody in this area who wants to work on it or is working on it, then it's probably a bad idea, right? Because the breadth of the things that happen in this ecosystem is legion. And I want to tie that into this statement about a new discipline. And I think that's very, very apropos. The space medicine, in my view, is more than about space, right? So I teach the cardiovascular pathophysiology class to HST students, yeah? Right? And how do you help people understand concepts? You show them extreme situations. And how does a cardiovascular system respond in these extreme environments? There are elements of this that permeate much more than just space per se. It is an example of physiology in many different ways, and more than just physiology. I just say that is because it's kind of the most obvious correlate. So I really do view this as being a new discipline worthy of expenditure of resources, and more importantly, worthy of efforts of talented students and scholars. In that vein, within the medical engineering, medical physics program at HST, we are a thrust, we call it, and it's called extreme, something in extreme space and extreme environments. Is that right?
Pun intended.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Extreme environments in space.
Extreme environments in space medicine, and we are trying and making an effort to identify future scholars who are interested in this space so they can come here. We want others to recognize that this ecosystem is a home for this. And this is a place where you can learn this new discipline from the best minds in the world. Thank you, Lonnie.
Thank you, Colin. No, we were talking earlier, the sense of when we had our introductory meeting, your enthusiasm about talking about how environmental stress tests, physiologic stress tests, whether Everest or other more robust areas, have a tremendous amount to teach us about what comes into the MGHED or the Brigham ED, and just that basic pathophysiology. And Vamsi yesterday was talking about, we got genes and environment, and we've been dumping ungodly amounts of research with great results on the gene side of the equation, but looking at the environmental side of the equation, that the genes are simply a bespoke solution to what the existing conditions are, and that if we look at those conditions, and as we change globally the conditions that surround us, we ought to be thinking seriously about its impact on health. And so, and to look at the environment as potentially a therapy. And that is cool. I mean, that's like 25 years. And I will very respectively say, there have been times that people didn't see this as being interesting. And so just because if you got an idea out there, just because somebody in a suit maybe doesn't believe in it quite yet, find that passion and chase after it. It's important. So, Alex, your thoughts on as far as how we can build out both institutional and then governmental and philanthropic support for this? Just to be clear, the people, at least on our side of the street, Luke and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of us at least in here who work nights, holidays, weekends, seeing patients, and that's how we pay the bills. And that's, somebody was just asking, it's like, wait, what's your source of funding? It's like, for the most part, it's us seeing patients, which is great. It's how we train our fellows, and I remember is John Coe still here? Talking with GME, and we were getting some pushback saying, well, you're making your fellows work clinically. It's like, yeah, of course we're making them. That's what makes them good doctors. But how do we build out institutional investment and resources for what is the future right now?
I love how you all are picking on the youngest person in the in this panel as a way of doing this, but how do we work on this? Well, first off, I would probably call the track Just Extreme, because I would fund it if it was called that. Second off, I think that it's up to us to come up with a compelling vision and then go pitch it to people. And I think that a lot of what led to the inflection in the curves was, the sort of private engagement in, let's call it the space race. And I think that if we only think about engagement with government as a route to getting funding, I don't think we'll actually be there. I think it's a conversation to understand what the future is. Going to Mars is very different than going to the moon, is very different than just going up to ISS. And the space requirements for that are very different. And thinking about our ability to come up with bespoke solutions that can address some of these things and that can build with some of them, I think would create a very compelling, competitive package. And so I think the answer is you go to everybody, but you start to shape a message of what we can do uniquely and why we are the right ecosystem to do it. And I think you have a lot of the bona fides around it to make it a very compelling message. But it comes down to really asserting our value proposition, I would say.
Thank you, Alex. Mike?
Yeah, I believe that first of all, this will be a slow growth moment if there is not expansion in space travel, but there's also a slow growth moment unless there is interest in actually recognizing that it's a unique environment and a very unique, impactful environment. And actually the lessons that we can learn from space travel can also be brought down to Earth. So I think the first thing is seeing this as a growth industry, and if others see this as a growth industry, allows us to then be early on the kind of relevance front, right? The other thing that will make us, particularly in this environment, unique is research. So we can place a doctor on the launch pad and we can have them examine patients, and lots of people can do that. And there's not an endless need for those. There's just a few of them needed, and so that's not the thing that we're trying to do. The thing we're trying to do is explore the impact and what it does to human physiology and the research behind it. And the thing that'll make this place special is actually leveraging all these resources to do real research as to what this is going to look like, because we are future facing. And I think if you can tell the story of like what's needed now, but really what's needed in the future and where it's going and how we need real medical research and physiologic research to see what human spaceflight really does, I think it's super compelling. It's just going to take, very much like you think of funding anything, it's going to take venture capital. It's not going to take, there's not established grants. There's not an NIH program that's going to do this. There may be a military program that's going to do it or a State Department, but it's going to be mainly venture capital. And venture capital needs a compelling vision for the future, and venture capital also invests in the people, in the team. So if we look at any successful company, it's the vision of what they can do, but it's also the team. If you've assembled the team of people who are going to be able to do this stuff, and they have a vision, then investments will come. And I think that just assembling the team, which you're doing, assembling the ecosystem and making a compelling vision is the first step in sort of getting venture capital.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Can I ask a question? Hello? Not yet. Not yet. I can't even ask a question yet. Oh, there we go. So I did my MD PhD at the University of Illinois. I was the Medical Scholars Program, and that program is no longer in existence. But they did switch over and change a model to a medical engineering school that they created. So other groups in other places are catching on, I think, to what has happened here in terms of HST. We've seen some changes at like North Carolina and the Triangle and other big research places. And where I left, down in Houston at the Texas Medical Center, collaboration was developing. And people, I think, are trying to reproduce the model that's up here to some extent. On the flip side of that coin, right, MD PhDs who can cross these boundaries and act as translators, it takes a long time, it's a long investment, and it's not everybody wants to do it. And there have been funding pathways which are now changing and at risk, along with research funding pathways from the government, right? The NIH programs have seen a lot of changes, let's say, in the last year or so. NASA itself, a lot of uncertainty about the budgets, right? And so I get calling out philanthropy, private individuals, and VC as places to potentially make that up. But I left Baylor College of Medicine, and not just me. Baylor had a Center for Space Medicine that had been there for probably, I think, 15 years at that point. One of the leaders in that, space. And I left because what they had was a center in name only, right? There was no support for junior faculty. There was no mentorship or pathway building to build those junior faculty up. And so in part of thinking about the entire pathway to train people, right? Coming out at the end of these programs, you don't end up fully formed, right? You need junior faculty packages, you need junior faculty support, you need junior faculty. How do you get them to integrate into the ecosystem as it goes today, right? To be able to find that funding. And so the places that we look are to the institutions. When I found my institution wasn't providing that, I jumped ship and went someplace that supported me. And now, the open question lying here is, in this time of great uncertainty with federal funding and all of these sort of things, right? Are there pathways that we can envision that the institutions can provide for the junior faculty, the ones that are exiting these pathways, that helps them get that footstep up? I think in the past, we were able to depend heavily on like K grants and other things like that, potentially, on the research side. But now, right, there's a lot of uncertainty in this area. So do the institutions step into this domain, or how do we partner to open up and find those places for junior faculty as they come through?
Just wanted to, so you mentioned NIH and you alluded to some federal things that are going on. Is this being recorded? No? This is not being, all right, I'll try to, right.
So you don't have to be delicate. Don't.
Yeah.
So they're on furlough, they're not watching. As a private citizen.
Thank you. Right, so I will, so there should be a Center for Space Medicine, Space Physiology, Extreme Environments in Boston. This is the place where it should be, right? And I will say that training is a lifelong endeavor, largely, right? Your degree puts you at the start of the process, but it certainly is by no means the end. As a clinician as well, we continue to learn throughout our careers. Each new experience, each patient that presents differently is something that we learn from. So I think the educational endeavor has to involve, right, there's potentially an undergraduate component, certainly a graduate component, and a postgraduate component. And I think there are many ways that can happen. I don't purport to know the answer here, but the statement about venture capital, I think, is very, very interesting. And you can envision something where there are people from different disciplines all invested in this enterprise, and there may be things that come out of that are venture capital, and others may be interested. So it's a pipeline, right? In an educational process, and also producing things that can help people in the real world. Again, I just want to relay back to what I've stated previously. There are many examples of space research that has benefited people who will never go into space and who have no plans and no interest in space. So the discussion about the benefits of such a center extends way beyond what space is. I'm sorry, I'm going to shut up in just 10 seconds. The one thing I wanted to add is that the MD and PhD, right, was the time-tested mechanism for training physician scientists. But there are some MDs who do not want to practice medicine and want to invest their lives in scientific investigation. And so precisely within the HSC program, we have an arm where the students who get a PhD in medical engineering and medical physics, they take medical classes. They have an introduction to clinical medicine experience where they are forced to interact with patients and healthcare providers in an attempt to sort of give them the same kind of requisite skills that one needs to contribute without necessarily getting an MD.
So just to add on to what Colin said, I think of a couple things. One, I recognize that we need to be creative. And so I don't know the answer to solving all the problems that happen with the government. I think about where I have agency and what I can do with it. I'm inspired by the structure of HST, where we take people like me who are not doctors and we teach them enough medicine to be dangerous. And we put them in medical classes for a year, we have them do rotations. There are easy wins that we can have. Things like, taking MD students that already exist in this ecosystem and creating a master's program over here where we train them in engineering and all the things that we would want that are related to space. So I think there are things that are low risk that could have incredible payoff and that could start to build a community, and where you could imagine having larger cohorts and building that gravity that pulls things in. How do I think about funding? In this ecosystem, I've often thought about a FOMO model. And what I mean by that is that I found that because you have so many institutions that are around, most institutions want to get involved in something that they think is great. So I don't think that this is going to be something that MIT will ever lead alone. I don't think it's going to be something that Harvard will ever lead alone. MGB, Boston Children's, pick your favorite place. But I think that if you create a consortium of them, which you can do here because of the density of the institutions and because you have so many people that are connected and know people, and have so many joint appointments, that you can build something that actually has legs and that is self-feeding. And so I think about like the seed grants we just had launched for MIT and MGB. We had 134 calls for 6 slots, right? Which shows you how much people want to work together. And when we needed more money, MIT put in a little bit, which caused MGB to feel like they had to put in more money, which caused others to feel like they had to put in more money. And so it's that model. We don't have huge pockets of state-donated money. We have faculty slots. We have a faculty opening this year. If there's a fantastic person that's thinking about space medicine, we'd love to hire them. But once they come in, they'll get a startup package, they'll get their space. But if there's a magical recipe to getting free funding after that, I have not mastered it. And maybe that's why they put me in charge. But I view this opportunity for us to think about not what an MIT can do, not what an MGB can do, not what a Harvard Medical School can do. I don't think that we independently can compete. Like, MIT is a pretty good engineering school.
Report, yeah.
And Harvard's a pretty good school too, and Harvard Medical School is a pretty good medical school, and MGB is a pretty good, hospital ecosystem. But together, I think they're unparalleled, and I think that that's the vision we have to pitch, and that's the model we have to make, and it's having buy-in. And so I think the most important thing about this panel is that you got us to show up. We care, we're here, we'd like to see this happen, and we're willing to help pull the people together in order to do it. But I don't think that any one of us has the solution, but I think that today is a good day, and yesterday was too. But it starts to bring people together to think about, like, what are we going to say? Who are we going to approach? How are we going to do that? And I think that that's what we need to do, because then there'll be that sort of groundswell where you can then get, local government involved and so on and so forth.
Would you like an introduction? Or?
Yeah, thank you so much for this, and thanks a lot, Stuart, for having me here today. Melissa Hoffer from the Healy administration. And I may have missed some of this yesterday. I just was able to share about a few hours of the day with you today. But listening to this, one thing that I'm really trying to understand is I think the value proposition for MGB, Harvard, MIT is very well understood. I don't think that's something that we struggle to communicate. What I think is really important is like the narrative of what do we get out of this? Why are we going to space? Why is that important? Space travel itself is an enormous amount of greenhouse gas emissions, so we have to be able to get something in exchange for that. And I'm wondering if there's a way to link it to other types of technology development. So fusion, for example, which can use, potentially quantities of helium-3 that are only available on the moon. We're going to need to mine it. There are people investing in that now. There are people who are already entering into offtake agreements with that company, for potential fusion plays in the future that will power AI development. So that's a way to knit together 3 different, extremely interesting technology innovations that are happening. So I'm just wondering, how are you thinking about how does space travel fit in with some of the other narratives like climate, like AI that are happening now? Thank you.
It's a great question. I'll turn it over to Colin in a second. But what I would say is that this point about, that's right, I called you out. This idea that it's really about engineering under ultimate extremes, I think pushes us to do things better, more efficiently, and to learn things that are useful. There are things we can learn about the human body when we put it into environmental stresses that can be beneficial, right? There are ways that we can make processes more efficient, work with less, do things in smaller formats. The ability to create something that's portable that goes onto a space shuttle creates the opportunity to bring that same technology into a rural clinic. For me, I think about it from the lens of the genomics work that I do, where if I can take something that I previously could only do at Broad or MIT, adopt it, and then bring it to do work in, Lusaka or in Dakar, I can then use that to transform a precision medicine pipeline with the Farber because I figured out how to work in any context. And so, to me, I think it's an environment where we learn things about human physiology, and it's a place where we learn how to engineer better solutions that can have impact here on Earth. I don't think I'm going to space. I never say never because I've been proven wrong a lot of times, but I think that the things that we're thinking about here, the things we can learn about the body, the things we can learn about how to engineer solutions can be transformative. And I think that if we can capture that, as excited as I am about things like fusion and helium on the moon, I think that selling people on a combination of future gains as well as near-term gains is the solution that's going to get us to where we need to be. And I agree, it's not the proposition of the three institutions, it's why this is the ecosystem for this particular problem, as opposed to the ecosystem for every problem.
Well, I think the question actually gets at a very core issue. What is the tangible value proposition for this endeavor, right? We want to write down on a sheet of paper or somebody, this is what you will get, this is what you will obtain by pursuing this. And I think that is, and I think there is a long list that one could obtain, quite frankly. There are some things that there was some data some time ago about protein structures and how these could be obtained in a low gravity environment, right? And the quality of the structures, and I think there are ramifications there for drug design, quite frankly, relative to there. So I think that one can name those tangible things, and I think the things that one needs to do to sustain life in space has ramifications for how we can make life better here. And that's in terms of the things that we build there, how can it use those who are impaired, right, and otherwise. So I think the discussion and the specifics, I think, is what you're pointing to, which is really important. And I think that's a discussion that goes beyond here. But I think that articulating the things that one can potentially get from this is not challenging.
The ROI has been an age-old discussion with that since the inception of NASA, about what's the spin-off technology and what does it get us on Earth, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, that concept of like what's it get us and what's it worth and how does it translate back is a 80-year-old concept, or however long NASA's been around, right? So I don't necessarily think 60, maybe 60-year-old, sorry. So I think there are those things. I think a lot of them are unpredictable and what they are going to be. But I also think that if you look at the arc of human history and very recent human history, there's almost no way we're not going to go into space. There's no way we're not going to expand this. There's no way this is not going to be a thing. And so the real, for me as an emergency physician, I'm sort of ridiculously and reductively practical. And so the practical aspect for me is who's going to build a new specialty that recognizes the unique physiology of space, who's got the ecosystem on Earth academically to be able to do this, how do we structure it, and then how do we make it a place where people thrive? And to Eric's original first question, anybody in the world or in the country can build a center. You can name something a center. We got a lot of centers, right? But just because you name a center, it doesn't mean it has real research, real faculty, real collaborations, real cross-fertilization, and real relevance. And so, I think this place has all of the potential for the recipe to make this a relevant, important, research-based enterprise to build a new specialty.
Thank you, Mike. No, and Melissa,
I would just
I
add
think,
one thing there, Stuart, which
Please.
is that I 100% agree that we can't predict everything that's going to come, but particularly if our view is that we're going to go after VC dollars, we're going to have to think about what our ROI is in the near term. And over-delivering is great, but we need to explain what the value is going to be soon, or we need to be going to people where it's very clear what the value is, like a private company, so that they understand what the reason is to partner with us. And so I would encourage us coming out of this to, think about a white paper that really clearly articulates our position on these things, what we want to do, why we want to do it, and what we think we're going to be able to deliver. And obviously, person power and educated workforce is a huge part of that. But speccing out the things that are there is important. And I was thinking about how complicated it is to do research in space. And I was thinking, well, if we could even help to improve the design or the kinds of experiments that are done or what we could learn from it, or like what kinds of things should be prioritized and help think through that, I think there's tremendous value because, it is a lot of carbon emission. It is a lot of dollars. And so I think we can think about how to do better, do more, and have greater impact.
And just to totally agree, and I think that we have a really good local lesson in that, right? The idea of looking at very extreme environments on Earth through wilderness medicine, all the work that you've done, gives us a little bit of a snapshot of translational research that brings it back to the bedside of a patient.
I think when you have an open-ended question or an equation that you're trying to solve, what helps you a lot are the boundary constraints, because that makes it specific in terms of the solution. And I think this discussion can be what are the tangible things that one can provide, but I think it has to begin with what the you or the saying you, I mean others, the Healy administration. I only say that because you mentioned it. Deem as being priorities. Right, and I think that dialogue can really get to a sense of, because there's the long-term goals and objectives, right? And those are hard to see precisely what they are. But I think the short-term objectives can be guided by some of these boundary constraints in terms of what are the priorities there, if that makes sense.
no, and I was going to say the sense
Stuart,
of,
we've got somebody in the middle.
I'm sorry?
Are we still answering the prior question?
Got a question?
Oh, it's a new question.
May I?
Yes.
If I can just finish up that, and then we can, to respond directly to the question. The sense of, this is going to happen. It doesn't need us to sign off on it. Commercial space is going to be sending large quantities of people to space in the near future. The U.S. is going to be sending people far afield to lunar bases, to Martian exploration, and this is going to be happening by people who are friends of ours. And so part of this is purely, we are not going to send our people into harm's way without having thought about really carefully how can we mitigate, how can we diagnose, how can we treat them. So that's part of it. It's going to happen, and so how do I, as a physician, do the best job I can to protect my patient population? That's part of it. The other part of it is the work Vamsi and I were doing, and Warren Zapal before that, the sense that your genes are a bespoke solution to a particular environmental condition. And as our friend from NASA, Todd, was telling us yesterday, 670, Eric, people have been to space so far, and more people than that summited Everest last year. And so what we know about humans in space is almost zero. And so the work that Mike alluded to with hypoxia, when I first started going to the hypoxia symposium in the late 90s, which is a biannual meeting in Lake Louise, it was purely a mountain medicine meeting. And it was just like, these whack job doctors getting together, studying altitude, what relevance does this have? And at that point, we didn't know that high-altitude pulmonary edema was caused by vasoconstriction of the vessels and loss of fluids. I mean, just fundamental questions that we didn't have answers for, and we still don't, for what happens in the brain in low oxygen states. And that's just like, it's the fundamental life threat in the fundamental organ, and we don't know what's going on. That should be embarrassing to us. And then if you look at the development over the last 20 years, it's gone from being a kind of a sidebar curiosity of wilderness medicine people to it's been absolutely central to oncology. So the control of low oxygen states of blood vessels is absolutely foundational to cancers that weren't treatable when I trained, and now are. And so the willingness, and it's kind of like saying, well, at Texas Instruments, computer chip, why should Massachusetts have invested in that? It's because this is the wave of the future. This is changing, and it's a fundamental change in the landscape that if we don't get out in front of, other people are going to, in the other states that are investing in that. So how do we better figure out, whether it's senescence, bone health, aging, there's some fundamental things that we're gonna learn in the near future because we're not on Earth that are gonna have huge application.
I don't think that we have adequately addressed one part of your question, which was really about the environment and the climate. And I will tell you that's one of the foremost issues in my mind. How many people here know that on Katy Perry's flight, which got bashed so much that it was a liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen rocket, that the exhaust was water vapor and not greenhouse gas? I mean, probably some of the engineers do, but most of the public doesn't, right? So whatever you think of that flight, right, the fastest growing segment of space travel right now is suborbital, mostly on rockets that actually don't have an impact on the environment in that way because they generate water vapor the same way that the space shuttle main engines did. Other rockets absolutely do. That's absolutely a part of it, and it's also a tiny, tiny proportion of the greenhouse gas that's gone into the atmosphere from much, much larger industries. So, like many things, right, there's the trade-off, and I don't want to see anything else go into the atmosphere, but I think that for all the talk of tangibles, there's one intangible that we have to talk about, which is every single person that does get to go up there, and we yesterday had the author for the overview effect, gets a sense of just how fragile the Earth is, right? NASA has the best brand in the world. NASA gave us that picture, and we didn't even know we wanted it, right? So if you really want to change people's minds and get them a sense of how fragile it is, this is a way to do it, and there are ways to do it safely. So I want to make sure we hear that.
Thank you. All yours. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the topic of epigenetics, and I think Dr. Colin, you brought up disease profiles, diseased individuals. So I hear everyone speaking a lot about sort of an inductive pathway. I've always thought of space travel as a form of time travel as far as disease profiles go in like human progression. So is there a pathway to like deductive medicine where you can take late stage chronic disease sufferers and use them to inform space medicine?
That's a excellent question, and I'm not sure I have a satisfactory answer to it. I will say that here on Earth, when we want to understand how sick somebody is in a cardiovascular space, we stress them, right? Oftentimes, right? This is familiar to those of my age and older. Right? You get on a treadmill or you work really hard, you get injected with some medication that stresses the cardiovascular system, and then you image the response of that stress, and you get a real sense. So I think there is a connection between disease processes, because it's just a more extreme example of what we do here on Earth. With respect to specific disorders, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and others, I think there is a venue that is along the lines of what you speak. But I do think that the space and the stress created to human physiology will help us learn so much more about disease processes as they appear on Earth.
Just as we wait for Jen's question, I'm going to prime you, if I can have 3 or 4 sentences from you about what a vision for success for us is coming out of this. I would appreciate it. Jen Rockless.
Thank you for the conversation. I like to reverse engineer sometimes, and you all seem to have a same cultural issue that I have as a human systems person, which is that for decades we have missed the data because we didn't gather it, right? So every time a crew member made a mistake on orbit, we never recorded it because we just made it go away before we could. So I have zero data for the last 30 years on how we've done it designing interfaces for humans. I don't know, because no one will tell me. And in your field, where the medical part comes against HIPAA and other things, right? One of the challenges, if you think about reverse engineering, who's going to be taking on the services that you all are going to create an entire cadre of humans to go off and tackle, is what are these companies going to want as the product or service that you're going to be providing through their educational pathways? But then also, how do we get over sharing the data and sharing the wisdom and sharing the knowledge in the medical field specifically, where so much is protected, and we don't often get as far ahead as we could if we were open to more conversations around it. So as we now start flying public folks, who perhaps maybe the consent involves, and all your medical data is going to be available, maybe not attributed, of course, but available. I'm wondering if you think about how data is a part of this conversation and where the data goes and how it's managed and who owns it, because I think that as an infrastructure piece of all of this education is that in terms of how we engineer with it. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, no. Well, I'm wondering if it's a comment or a question.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's an important question, and it is central to just about everything. There's a huge desire to have open, shareable data because it creates an incredible substrate for learning. In some places, it is the proprietary secret sauce that nobody wants to share. And so I'd love to say, I come from a place where we're committed to open data. We love to share everything possible within the restrictions of what, patients wish because of patient privacy and because of the ethics involved in it. But in an ideal world, I think we should be pushing to share as much as we can. That means both data, knowledge we learn, passing that along. By becoming a place that sort of brings people together because they see that they can learn from you and that they can, work with you, it creates more gravity. And so to me, we should be doing that. I don't pretend to have a simple solution because it's going to depend upon the specific context. And I've always recognized that I can't speak for others. And so it becomes a question of what is it that we're trying to pull in? Who do we need to ask for that? And I think we can try and push to the greatest degree possible to have things open and explain the value of it. But I think that getting back to Stuart's point of what are tangible takeaways from today, we can focus on the kinds of ways in which we want to engage people in the process and what we believe is important and try and educate people on that. But at the end of the day, it's informed consent and they get to make their own decisions.
And, the medical world, of course, is replete with understanding that we can do interventional and observational studies and cohort studies, et cetera. The cohort is so small. And if we're actually looking at physiologic responses to space and we're looking at 600 individuals who, by the way, we won't have access to their data necessarily, then there is a bit of a challenge with that, right? And because then we're sort of looking at proxy measures or other things as well. So I think that, as Alex said, maybe there is a future state where people are studied extensively when they come out, and those data are available for people to be able to sort of make inferences. But for now, it doesn't seem like that would be the case. I don't know, but I'm guessing that that's not the case.
I think I learn more from when I'm wrong than when I'm correct. And so I think data, and speaking as a computer scientist, we want all the data, right? And it's never something you're going to get in a healthcare setting. I mean, there are many obstacles towards that end. But I think the potential data that one can gather in spaceflight, right, I think is legion. Right? The things that one can learn. So I do think, as an aside, what I see as a rich outcome from this is not, there's in part the ability to be able to do it and what you will learn, but the data that you will acquire there, I think is really underappreciated.
Just in closing, to have the three of you here, the institutions you represent, the gravitas that you bring, you took a number of hours out of extraordinarily busy days just to hear from each of you. Colin, why?
I've dedicated my professional life to those who are ill, and anything that I think that can promote the care of those who are ill, I am invested in. And I honestly believe that what is described here has a potential to do so.
A, it's really cool. B, my job fundamentally is to support students and faculty. I'm here for my faculty. I'm here for, I don't know which of you are students, but I'm here for you. I believe in collaboration, and I believe in this idea that we can do more together when we work collectively, and that there's so much that none of us can do by ourselves, but we can do when we, are willing to talk about the things that we don't know and have conversations and push into new areas. And the reason that I'm here is because I like learning. It's what brings people to me like me to MIT. It's that we constantly get to learn from students, from our colleagues, from people in the surrounding ecosystem. It's what makes this fun. I think all the time about environmental determinants of health. We've got a paper that's coming out on high-fat diet in a couple weeks. We're thinking about how that impacts, tumor formation. I'd love to understand how other environmental determinants of health play a role in this, because they're interesting questions to me. I have spent a lot of time developing technologies and trying to port them over to other countries so that I could help people understand what was the basis of a disease. I see this as all interconnected, interrelated, and I see so much to learn from a group of people that I don't normally engage with. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm happy that y'all invited me.
Thank you, Alex. Dr. Brandon?
And I'm really interested in practical innovation, things that are really going to do something. We run a healthcare system that sees 750,000 patients a year in emergency departments and urgent cares around the state. And I have to find ways of preserving it, advancing it, making it better all the time. So I'm just really interested in new things that are innovative, multidisciplinary, collaborative, and are going to, frankly, this is just super interesting. And it's gonna happen, and I think that there's a sense of, recognition that this ecosystem is such a special place, and being at such a special place allows us to think really interesting thoughts and come up with really interesting solutions. So I just am excited about doing something really unique, really new, really important, and on the cutting edge, which is, I think, super interesting. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you all. And just to make absolutely clear, all the faculty members here recognize that your support and encouragement has made all the difference. So we're appreciative. Thank you all.